number 13, Neighborhood Stabilization Program. Consider Mayor's recommendations on the Neighborhood Stabilization Program from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development as follows. A, to amend the city's 2008 Consolidated Plan and 2008 adopted budget as presented in the updated CDBG Schedule 4. And there's a B and C, but I'll let the horse's mouth carry the information.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Henry Reimer, Director of Inspections in the Department of Regulatory Services. We've been through this now through the Community Development Committee and the Ways and Means Committee, and this was postponed from last PSNRS. So I'll just give you a very truncated version of what we're facing here from the piece that Regulatory Services involved in. The Housing Recovery Act of 2008 established neighborhood stabilization program funds and directly allocating $5.6 million to the city of Minneapolis straight from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I've just been informed this morning by Linda Higgins that Minneapolis will be receiving an additional $5.6 million. So it'll be about $11.2 million. And the 5.6 in addition that I was informed of today is actually coming through the state, because HUD had actually directly granted the 5.6 to Minneapolis and approximately $40 million to the state of Minnesota to then allocate out. Now there are significant additional strings to the $5.6 million that are coming from the state, and having just been informed of it, I'm not prepared or here to talk about how that additional $5.6 million is to be spent, although I think the lion's share, possibly all of it, will be through the CPED programs that we've addressed previously in conjunction with the Regulatory Services program that I'm here to talk about.
Mr. Rano, just to make sure, there's a 40 what?
About $40 million
yeah.
from HUD went to the state of Minnesota for allocation by the state. Of that, we get an additional $5.6 million.
Okay, and so that original 5.6 was not part of a 45.6 million to the state.
Correct.
It was 40 million to the state, and we got directly this 5.6 million.
Exactly.
And so the state has not yet. This is the first time the state is actually giving us money out of this pot from the federal government. Because originally I'd heard it that this came through the state, but
the initial 5.6 million did not. The second $5.6 million does.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. We are looking at, out of the first 5.6 million, 1.7.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Hofstad has a question.
Thank you for allowing me to interrupt, Mr. Chair. Sure. Do we have, I know that we had specific documentation that we needed to provide in order to receive these dollars, but are there certain things that we as a city and you as a department and our other fellow departments that help make this a success? I mean, because we could have received less dollars than we did.
Yes.
And so what were some of the keys that you think were?
Well, the lion's share of the work that went into that came from the IGR department and also from CPED, so they deserve the lion's share of the credit for the work that went in to really telling the Minneapolis story to the folks at HUD when they were deciding how this money is to be allocated out. And it's really based on the impact of foreclosures on municipalities. And we wanted to make sure that the metrics that HUD were looking at were metrics that were meaningful to us here in Minneapolis. The number of foreclosures, the concentration of foreclosures, the impact that that has on property values. All of these types of things were factors that we made sure that our voices were heard on when HUD was initially deciding what factors they were going to use to allocate the money. Also, the same types of activities have been going on with the state to get the additional $5.6 million. And I, again, believe CPED deserves the lion's share of the credit for doing the heavy lifting on that. So those are the types of activities that have been involved in. We have been involved as well in regulatory services, but we have been somewhat of a junior partner on it.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to take the time for that, because sometimes we don't give the history of why we received the dollars or grants, and it really is a result of much behind-the-scenes work by a variety of people, and so thank you for sharing that with not only us, but the viewing public.
Well, this is also, I think, a real prime example of a high level of cooperation amongst the 3 different departments that have been working on this. And the proposal that has come forth from the mayor was a joint proposal to the mayor by CPAD and by regulatory services. This division of the resources that are coming from the feds is something that both CPAD and regulatory services has embraced, and now the mayor has made the recommendation and is on board with that. So, you know, it is, I think, a testament to the high level of cooperation that the departments share, and I think it's higher than it has ever been. So, you know, so we've got $1.7 million that are proposed to be used for the demolition of blighted structures, and that's one of the authorized uses coming from the Housing and Urban Development, coming for the NSP money. Now, there are a lot of strings and lots of restrictions on how the money can be spent, but one area where there are fewer restrictions is when we are demolishing blighted structures. We would be able to use the $1.7 million to demolish blighted structures in the city, whether or not that particular structure had been foreclosed upon. Although that distinction is really not very important, since the vast majority of the vacant and boarded buildings that we demolish have been foreclosed upon. They've been long abandoned by their previous owners. The $1.7 million will allow us to continue on the pace that we have set this year for demolishing blighted structures. And, you know, this is very important. Blighted structures are attractive nuisances. They are the locus of criminal activity. They affect neighborhood livability. You all know that, so I don't really need to spend a lot of time convincing you of that fact, but it is such an important fact to at least mention here, because what we are doing by demolishing vacant and boarded structures is giving neighborhoods a chance at recovery. Now, the number of vacant and boarded buildings in the city has quadrupled since 2005. We had about 250 that year, and this year we have topped over 950 vacant and boarded properties. And that's a result of the foreclosure crisis and the housing market collapse. We've responded to the problem by increasing resources in this area. In 2006, we demolished approximately 45 buildings in Minneapolis. Last year, we were up around 60. This year, we will be around 110 properties. And in order to keep up with the pace of the degradation of these old blighted structures, we've had to borrow money each year in order to keep on that pace. In 2006 and 2007, we borrowed money each of those years from the CPED department. And this year, we borrowed $1.25 million from the county to keep up with our nuisance abatement activities. Now, the key word there is borrow. That money has to be paid back, and so we will be paying that back. The county is going to be paid back 70% of that $1.25 million. So between $850,000 and $900,000 will have to be paid back to the county out of our demolition activities.
Mr. Reimer, Councilmember, sure. President Johnson has a question.